Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. It is Jeremy Werner and Joey Wagner, and we just had our annual media roundtable with Illinois Athletics Director Josh Whitman. About an hour opening statement. He actually went the under. We had set it at 72 minutes this year, so congratulations to Josh Whitman. Scott Ritchie and I got it wrong. I think Brett Behrens and Joey Wagner. Kudos to you guys. You said
under. I took the over. I was taking 68.5 days. Oh, yeah, that was over. I was hammering it no matter.
Barons took the under. I know that for sure.
Oh, wait, what are we up into? It's like 72?
72.
I took the under on that. All right, I do win.
I had it written down for you.
I forgot. It 10's still a little early for me to chat.
Yeah, but then he went for another hour of questions and then had a little scrum out there with the TV reporters and some people needed some sound bites for 30 minutes outside. But it's always good to catch up with Josh Whitman, and we always appreciate it. And it's always newsworthy. There's so much news that comes out of this. And I'll just set it up. It's an actual round table. They have like four sets of tables around this Hall of Fame room. And Josh speaks to us for an hour of everything he wants to get out. And then he takes questions for about another hour that I find very informative. And Whitman has a great pulse, obviously, on what is happening, not only his own program, but nationally now as a Division I council chair. And I'll say it again, like I'm being objective when I say this, and Scott Docterman from the Athletics said the other time, Josh is really good at this. He is really good at communicating. He's got vision. He's got foresight. And I think Illinois is very fortunate to have him as their athletic director during this time, Joey. And there's plenty of things we're going to talk about of the news that came out of this, some smaller things, some big things I know matter to fans, but also some really big picture things that I think are really important, what I would call the meat and potatoes that I think people should really focus on what came out of this. But he hits on every angle of his program and college athletics in these.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot in the micro in terms of some of the stuff I know, Jeremy, that we'll open with some of the more newsworthy items as it relates to Illinois athletics in particular. We'll open up with that. And then, this was a very important big picture roundtable. And it feels like the last couple of these 3 or 4 years, really probably starting back with the COVID one on Zoom. Maybe NIL was before that, but that one really sticks. It's like you've been kind of slowly building, and this snowball rolling down the hill has gotten a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And we've talked about more substantive changes happening in college athletics each year. And then this one, it's like, okay, all of those were big deals. And as Josh Whitman said, this is the biggest one. And I'm paraphrasing, like all the other ones kind of pale in comparison to the changes we're talking about now with the House settlement, revenue sharing, all of those things. And Josh has got an important voice. I don't know that he would stand up there and say, hey, listen to me, my voice is very important, but we recognize it. We recognize it given the councils he's on, the chairs he has. And he's been kind of at the forefront, not kind of, he has been at the forefront of these discussions with us. And as his profile has raised, as his longstanding tenure as the Illinois athletic director, as that's continued on, that voice has gotten a little bit louder in rooms that are bigger than just me, you, and the rest of the media group that covers Illinois.
Yeah, it's interesting when he started these, it was so much about what's the next facilities project? What's the next step for basketball and football? These programs you have to correct. And he has made huge strides with all of those. You think of all the facilities projects they've had. That was the first couple of years. Then COVID happened. In the hockey program, which was, what we were talking about a lot at these meetings, kind of took that back seat. And we wondered what was happening with that. But the last couple of years, you're right. It's been NIL. It's been, are student athletes going to be employed? Like, oh, now we're doing revenue sharing in the quote today.
Portal realignment.
Portal, all this stuff, like college football at large, like college athletics. What is the future of that? And I think it really hit ahead today, which I asked a question today that I've been wanting to ask him for a really long time. And I found his answer to be jarring, to be honest with you. But I think it was a little bit of a wake-up call that he acknowledged what the reality of the future of college athletics could be for a program like Illinois. So we will get into that. But he called this one of the most intense periods of change in college athletics. And he said, we've encouraged NIL, transfer portal, sports gambling. It's been a topic of conversation. But he said, I think that all pales in comparison to what we're about to go through with this House settlement, revenue sharing, all these other court cases. He said the rest of the stuff we've dealt with is going to be a footnote based on what we're doing now, because college athletics is going through this huge reformation where we don't have all the answers of what this looks like, Joey, but Josh Whitman is trying to be aggressive during this time and making sure that Illinois athletics is at the forefront of this and that they are proactive in moving their program forward. So we will dive into those weighty topics. Like that is what I would call the weighty topics, but there was some newsworthy stuff. And Derek Piper had the story right as we were done with this. We're not supposed to live tweet or anything, live post on our boards or anything throughout this thing. But Derek had the story right as this thing ended that Terrence Shannon Jr. will be honored in the rafters. This was a no-brainer. Josh Whitman said, hey, we know he didn't get All-American honors for a reason, but now that he's cleared his name, has been acquitted of the charges against him, we know that's why he didn't get All-America honors, to be one of the criteria to get into the stand. So as he prepares for the NBA draft, Josh Whitman called up Terrence Shannon Jr. I believe that was yesterday. He said on FaceTime and told him that he's going to have a spot in the rafters and that probably will happen within the next year. So this seemed like a slam dunk, obviously.
Yeah, a little breaking news from Josh Whitman this morning to us in the media room there. It made sense. I think that was our expectation that it would happen because it made sense. I think the big thing that I took from that was, and Derek did a wonderful job in his column a week ago, kind of laying out, okay, if you want to do it, you could call it, I think, two-time All Big Ten was one of the criteria he laid out, or maybe Big Ten tournament most outstanding player. One of the two, Terrence and Kejuan Garris was the other one who would have fit into that. And like that would have been a route that people could have said, okay, Josh Whitman didn't try to reroute this as anything other than like, this is a circumstance. This is why it happened. We're not going to overthink this. We're not going to rewrite our criteria to be up there. It makes sense for Terrence Shannon Jr. after one of the single greatest seasons. You could argue the single greatest season in Illinois basketball history to have his jersey, have his name up in the rafters at State Farm Center. I found that interesting because I did wonder if he was going to, well, it doesn't fit into this, but if we did that, like he didn't expand it. And I thought that it's very telling of his view of this whole situation, of how he mentioned how he was impressed with how Terrence Shannon handled himself, particularly in some of those more difficult road games, and the season that he had, which again, you in watching it, you knew, and then when you look back, it's like that was a dominant season by a dominant player who needs to have his jersey up there.
He didn't overcomplicate, which was a simple thing, right? Like this guy was one of the best players in the country. For the last 2 years, he's been one of the best players in the Big Ten. He's one of the, even though he's only been here 2 years, kind of like Nick Anderson, Kenny Battle, but he played somewhere else for 3 years. He is one of the best players in Illinois history. He should be up there. Like that, we all know it. And everybody knew it, and everybody knows he should be up there, especially after his name is cleared. So I also thought it was interesting that Josh Whitman said, they were kind of head-to-head at one point, right? Like Josh suspended Terrence Shannon because of the misconduct policy that they have. And he said he and Terrence have remained close, respectful throughout it. I mean, you saw those guys hugging throughout the postseason. Like you could tell they respect each other. Terrence had to do what he had to do with his legal team. Josh Whitman had to do what he had to do with his athletic department. But I thought it was notable that he mentioned like that personal relationship has meant a lot to him. And I'm sure he was very happy to be able to call Terrence Shannon with that news. And he mentioned, again, we've mentioned it on this pod, that he's amazed at how well Terrence performed and how well he handled himself, given the circumstances he had at those arenas, hearing from what he did in the crowd. And then I thought throughout the legal process as well, especially in that trial. So I thought that was telling. And then with the misconduct policy, Josh said they're still trying to figure that out because we can get into the weeds of all of these things, but he said you're risking suspending a player who is not guilty, but you're also risking playing a player who could be guilty. So either way, you're not going to get rid of that risk. So they're still trying to figure out the best way to go about that. And he disagreed with Colleen Lawless and that players who make a lot of NIL like Terrence Shannon Jr. should be treated differently. Cause he goes, I think you can understand as an athletic director, I can't think that way. So they haven't changed anything with their misconduct policy out of this, but just wanted to mention that too.
Yeah, that would be all I would want to add is I don't know that substantive changes to the policy are coming. I don't know that any are coming. I don't know that none are coming. Like he didn't really have an answer for that. I think that'll probably be made more clear by the beginning of the fall sports season, what that looks like. But he did really reiterate, and it kind of backed up, Jeremy, what he has said in that December press conference. And as you mentioned, you run two different risks here, right? And neither risk is particularly palatable to be in if you're an athletic director having to sort through that. So I'll be curious what, if, and how significant those changes are to the misconduct policy. I would prefer we never have to think of the misconduct policy again. But obviously it's a part of human life, and like that, those policies are there for situations that, unfortunately could come up. So I don't know. Like, I wish we had better answers. That was something I was curious about when we walked into the room today, but I understand that you don't want to make a rash decision and change your whole policy or say, hey, we're not changing anything. Why would we? Understand there's a lot of thought and deliberation that needs to go into that.
And you still need to have a misconduct policy.
Right.
You said, real life happens. And with how many athletes they have, like, we're all college kids. We're all humans, as you said, in human life. There's going to be issues with the law at some point. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from there, if they have any announcements or if nothing changes. The other big piece of news, especially with basketball, is yes, Illinois men's basketball will play Arkansas on Thanksgiving Day. Josh said around 3:30 Central Time, so that's after the Bears and Lions play. It'll be at T-Mobile Center in Kansas City. And boy, the storylines in this one: Brad Underwood and Chin Coleman on opposite sides, John Calipari and Orlando Antigua on opposite sides, and the Avicic brothers, Zvonimir and Tomislav, playing for Arkansas and Illinois respectively. Just adds to a loaded non-conference schedule for Illinois. So we got to figure out our holiday travel plans. That's what you and I have been doing the last couple hours, Joey. But man, what a non-conference schedule with Illinois. The neutral site game against Alabama. Tennessee is in Champaign. Neutral site against Duke at Madison Square Garden in February. The Missouri game, bragging rights game in December. And now in late November, Illinois playing Arkansas. That's 4 top 15 preseason teams, according to CBS Sports right now. Wow. For a team that's replacing, 10 guys on the team.
Yes, it's a really loaded non-conference schedule. And Josh Whitman said, hey, we're not going to run. You probably have the quote pulled up here. Actually, I could probably. Josh didn't say dudes very much, so you can command F that in the transcription here.
He said,
we got a big time.
Yeah, go ahead.
He said, we got a big time schedule and give Brad all the credit in the world for playing a bunch of dudes. We don't screw around in our non-conference. All right.
Yes.
All right. My only request. And look, these need to be taken into our request, Jeremy. I feel like need to be taken into consideration as this comes up here. Can we just leave, if there's a basketball game during the football, one of the 2 football bye weeks, can we make that like Western Illinois or a low major game where we could just give Piper a pat on the back and you and I could go enjoy a beer somewhere separately? I don't want to see each other a lot from August to April. Enjoy that time, but separately enjoy beers and not have to worry about missing a marquee game. But in much more real sense, Jeremy, that's a big game. And you're right. There are storylines all over. Kansas City was a site that you and I and Derek had talked about as like, hey, that would make sense. It's a great city. They've got the arena. You're not a home and home type situation. It's what you want. Like that is if you have an intersection of Bears and Illinois fan, that is a good Thanksgiving if you can find your way in front of a television for like 6 straight hours.
Yeah, looking forward to Caleb and the Bears upsetting Detroit that day. We'll see. But no, I mean, you think about this. They're scheduling like Michigan State, right? Tom Izzo did all the does Illinois win 2 of those games? I don't know, but man, I love it. And Matt Norlander tweeted out in response to our story that this is going to be on CBS, like right after the Bears and Lions. Like this is going to be on national television. Now, most people are probably going to go over to the other football game, Joey, but still, if you're a college basketball fan, potentially 2 ranked teams in this matchup with John Calipari replacing most of a roster outside of Trayvon Brazile. So they are the number 1 transfer class in the country. Jonas Adu from Tennessee, John L. Davis from FAU, 2 players Illinois played last year, and then a bunch of transfers from Kentucky with DJ Wagner, highlighting that list of Avicic as well, and a great recruiting class with the preps coming in with John Calipari as always. But just phenomenal that Illinois gets that stage. And like, think about it, like they're playing Duke at Madison Square Garden after playing in Madison Square Garden 3 of the last 4 years. Like this is big time stuff from this program. So I love that Brad Underwood is doing this, and there's no downside. If you lose to these teams, it doesn't hurt you Like, it only really helps prepare you for the Big Ten, get a couple wins, and obviously it can make a huge difference in March.
Yeah, and people care, right? I mean, people are going to care about Illinois basketball all the way through. But let's be honest. I mean, you think back to the Arizona game, it's that 3 years ago at the State Farm Center, Jeremy, at this point. You think back to the Tennessee game. Illinois basketball is a brand that people care a lot about and are going to draw TV ratings for caring a lot about. And they're good. They're good enough to put together a game against these teams that are perennially in the top 25, Illinois being one of those teams, or teams, that are going to be top 10 teams this season, right? And people, your casual fan will see, A, either this is 2 ranked matchups, or B, wait, Illinois, weren't they the ones that were in the, Elite Eight? Like, that's going to get eyeballs. And Illinois basketball, before Brad Underwood, for several years before him, and really in those first 2 seasons, weren't going to garner a lot of national eyeballs for what they were. They weren't very good. They were rebuilding in those first 2 years under Brad. And now they're back. And it's a brand, like, there's a lot of brand power with Illinois. It's probably the more sufficient way to say this. And, like, that matters when you're talking TV and exposure. And, yeah, teams want to play you because it's good for them too.
So what I'm interested in is, we should have followed up with this, to be honest with you. Is there a return of some kind? Because this is semi-home for Arkansas. Like, Kansas City is closer. Like, it's not ridiculously close, but it's – and this fan base, Arkansas, is insane. Like, when Illinois played in Kansas City and Arkansas was there a couple of years ago, and Kofi's last year here, where Andre Curbelo was concussed, and they just had a terrible first game against Cincinnati. That Arkansas fan base is just insane into their team. And so to get Illinois and Arkansas there is a lot of fun. Norlander reported that originally they were talking about being in Nashville, which is more of a neutral site, but not exactly close to either team. Does Illinois get a game in the United Center, whether it's 2 years from now? Because they're supposed to get Alabama in United Center in a couple of years. So does Arkansas come back to there for the United Center in 2 years, or could Indianapolis be that place? Like, that'll be interesting to see if there's another game that goes along with this. That's just my speculation. I didn't follow up, but we'll talk to Brad Underwood next week and we'll ask him about that.
Yeah, I also just want to say, like, I like the marquee. Like, you're seeing MTEs kind of fade into some level of not oblivion, but it's not, Maui's not what it used to be. Or you can look around and some of these aren't what they used to be. And teams are saying, hey, we don't need all this. Me, will go to this, neutral site that's still pretty regional for our fans to get to. And let's just go. And I like that. Like, that adds so much more fun to that late. It's probably not going to be too many in early November as teams, hello, Illinois, try to work new pieces in, figure out what they're going to look like. But that late November, I think Tennessee, I saw a report, was like an early December type of like, that's fun. Like, that gets attention, and you can learn about the team that either you're a fan of, or in our case that we cover, before Big Ten play starts. And you can build some of that, test yourselves against teams that are, come on, I mean, all these teams are probably going to be in the tournament, save for, I don't know, Missouri would be the one that you'd say, well, if one's not, it's going to be them. But it's fun, man. It's Brad Underwood likes it. Fans like it. Helps both teams. That's good. Now get Kansas.
Yes. And let's make that a home and home, please. I'd enjoy that a lot. And Brad Underwood, Tyler Underwood go back to Kansas City. Those guys love that area. Grew up basically around there. Football, Joey. Josh Whitman made this comment that he has made in private, but not publicly, I don't think, before, that he said, man, we're 3 wins from one of the best runs in program history. 1 win each of the last 3 years. Think about 3 straight bowl games if you do that. Potentially a Big Ten championship game appearance if you do that. But obviously he said that's how close it is between winning and losing, especially in the Big Ten moving forward. Somebody tweeted at me that Illinois had one of the tougher schedules in the country. I'm like, look at all of them. It's Big Ten and SEC. Like, that is where you are now. You're a Power 2 conference team. It's not going to get any easier. So he said he's still bullish on this program, and Bob Osmussen asked him what success looks like for this program. And he said the goal long-term absolutely should be getting into the college football playoff. Now maybe that's a one every 5 to 10 year kind of thing, Joey, but in a 12-team playoff, you can lose 3 games in the Big Ten and still potentially make it. You could have 4 teams from the Big Ten in the college football playoff. So he said, absolutely, that should be the expectation at some point. Is our goal should be getting in that conversation being in that conversation. Of course, they have to make some strides, but football is incredibly important to what they want to do moving forward. We'll get into that more, but he's still buying Brett Bielema. And I get it because it is obvious that they are more competitive, but they still have more steps to take. And that's why I think this season and next season are really important for this program.
Yeah, and he also said, we need to start sustaining success and turning some of those 3 straight years, into bowl games, and kind of what we thought, right? You've got to walk before you can run to the college football playoff. Now, if Illinois gets in there in 2 years or whatever, Josh Whitman's not going to give it back and say we're not ready. But like you kind of have to know where they are in terms of this quote unquote rebuild. It's not a quote unquote, it's just terms of this rebuild.
Well, just think about 2022. If the college football playoff was 12 games, like they would have missed out by like that much. Like right. if they would have won one more game, they beat Michigan or they beat Purdue or whatever, they might have the chance to get into the college football playoff.
Yeah, you can't set anything but getting in the 12-team playoff as your expectation. Or that, I mean, you're setting yourselves your goals. That's a better way to put it. Otherwise, you're selling your program way too short, and it's just not what literally anybody wants to hear. So it was good to hear him say that. It's just to hear the athletic director, kind of set what a lot of people are thinking. But I also asked him, I said, with that being said, like kind of a race to wins, how do you handle the non-conference scheduling? The Missouri series has been a topic on our boards. Jeremy, we have a lot of conversation, and I get it. Missouri's really ascending right now. That's a program in the SEC that looks really good, and Illinois hasn't hit that next gear under Brett Bielema. And Josh Whitman, and I'll have this in a story, at some point in the next day or two, said, hey, if it's one automatic qualifier from each league, we'll probably have to consider what our non-conference looks like. But if you get multi-qualifiers from each league, automatic qualifiers, then yeah, you can kind of ramp up your non-conference schedule here, and you can set up for some of those premier games if you're not worried about hitting a benchmark of X wins because you won't be an at-large bid. So I thought that was interesting, but we knew that this Josh Whitman didn't hire Brett Bielema to go 5-7 with his best years of 7-5, right? Brett Bielema didn't come here to go 5-7 with his best years of 7-5. Like they want to take that step, and obviously you're going into year 4. It's time to get closer to that. It's time for Illinois football to get closer to that, and we'll get into beyond just making people happy and getting people to Memorial Stadium and coaches staying gainfully employed by Illinois. Like there's a lot of big picture reasons in the college landscape that you need to have a football program that is competing at the top half of these power leagues that are developing here at the Big Ten and the SEC. So yeah, I mean he's bullish. Like none of this is to say he isn't excited about what Brett Bielema is doing. You've seen and we've talked at length, Jeremy, about the talent acquisition here over the last couple of months, particularly via the portal and some of the needs that they addressed. Now you just want to see them go out there and, if you're Josh Whitman, you want to see those wins start to manifest, those bowl games start to be a consistent thing and go from there.
Yep. Time to take the next step. Easy for everyone else to say. Shauna Green, undergoing contract extension talks with Josh Whitman right now. It sounds like her in her representation. So obviously 2 phenomenal years, especially if you would have flipped those. I know we've talked about that last year. They win a postseason tournament, even if it's not the NCAA tournament, that would have been huge. But they made the NCAA tournament 2 years ago. And I think we all have the expectation that they really have a chance to make the NCAA tournament this year. So obviously she is deserving of all of that because none of us thought it could happen this quickly, that Illinois women's basketball could be this competitive and actually have success in getting to postseasons and have a successful postseason like they had this past year. Another note, Icon raised 3 times what it did its first year in business. So I think we saw that come to fruition with men's basketball and football. And Whitman mentioned that has been key. And he mentioned football as a part of that. So it is a fact that football has had more to work with on that end. And we know men's basketball is doing really, really well. Anything else you want to add before we get into the weighty big picture issues here?
I don't think so. He expected a Shauna Green contract extension to come before the season was kind of a timeline he targeted. I get it, and I thought about it actually, Jeremy. If it was just really quickly, when there was like a 10-minute window of time between the time Lisa Bluter at Iowa retired and they promoted Jen Jansen from within, And I thought, wait a minute here. Like, you look at where coaches are from, right? Hey, Shauna's from Iowa. She's successful.
Shauna's agent probably wanted that to go a little longer. Like, hey, wait a week before you announce that.
And look, that's not to say Shauna had any interest in Iowa or Iowa had any interest in Shauna, but like naturally our job is to think about that. Like, hey, what if? And I thought, ooh, Josh might want to get some paperwork going here. And like you want to keep the way that she's quickly turned this program around, given this program substance to it, giving this program notoriety, getting people in State Farm Center. Like, you want to keep her around as long as you possibly can.
Shauna had a tougher job than Brad Underwood or Brett Beal.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been nobody in those arenas, and there's no history of success for the last 20 years. Like football, at least you have resources, right? Like you have some good players. Men's basketball, like, yes, you had. I'm not trying to undermine the work that Brett Bielema and Brad Underwood have done. I'm just saying I think the job that Shauna Green had has been tougher because of how bad women's basketball has been. I know football has been bad, but like you're still football in a Big Ten conference. You have the facilities, you have these things. I just think what she has accomplished in 2 years is just tremendous. And I did not, even though I like the hire, I did not expect it to be this good this quickly. And she's crushed it in the portal. She's obviously a really good coach.
Yeah, she's crushed it in the high school recruiting game as well. And I would expect to see that carry into the class of 2025 as that starts to come together. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Josh has said this, not today, but at times. Like, I don't know that anyone would have expected women's basketball to find the strides that it's found as quickly as it's found them.
Shauna did.
And yeah, Shauna said as much, right? Like, I think everyone's just kind of like, oh, my goodness, like this is – and Josh, I also want to add, was really – complimentary, excited about what they're calling the core four of Makaira Cook, Kendall Bostic, Adalia McKenzie, and Genesis Bryant, and how those four could really help shape this era and have helped. And now we'll have one more year to try to push them back to the NCAA tournament. I just think it's a remarkable turnaround. Contract extension absolutely makes all the sense in the world.
Okay, so now we get to the weighty issues that I think are really important. And I know these little micro things are what we talk about every day, right, Joey? But like, these are the issues that are going to shape what the future of college athletics looks like. And we have to kind of recap what the House settlement actually was. Like Scott Docterman broke this down great on our podcast. Go back and listen to some of that. But Whitman broke it down a little bit today. And part of this settlement that the NCAA and the conferences have reached is that they will have backward damages that will approach $2.8 billion to former players dating back to 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. So for Illinois, that means $1.2 million a year in the next several years. But then in fiscal year 2026, so the 25-26 sports year, there will only scholarship limits will be replaced by roster limits. And schools can decide how many scholarships they actually want to give out, but there's only going to be so many limits. So is it going to be 100 in football as opposed to 85 there is right now? Are there any walk-ons? Baseball. Could a team have 30 baseball scholarships? They could now instead of just 11 point whatever that they are allowed. So huge changes to what this looks like. But the biggest thing here, Joey, is that each school will be allowed, not required, but allowed to give $22 million in revenue sharing to their student athletes. And Whitman said today they're approaching this as if Title IX applies, which we still got to figure out, is that actually 50-50? Maybe not exactly, but probably around somewhere like that. I still got to figure all of that out. But Whitman said we are going to do the full allotment because if we want to compete in the Big Ten Conference, we can't not spend what everyone else we know is going to spend. So they have to find $22 million to put into this. And of course, they're going to get college football playoff money in a couple of years. They can create new revenue, but this is huge financial strain on a program. And that's going to cause some serious conversations. And for Josh Whitman, he brought up that this money just doesn't appear. Like we are not just given this money. We have to find a way. So they have to go through their budget and figure all this out. And that's going to include, and he kind of made reference to this in his open letter, which sports do we want to sponsor? do we have to fold sports so that we can pay the people we want to pay, which is men's basketball and football? Because without them, none of this other stuff really, really matters. So these are weighty, big conversations and huge financial decisions they have to make, Joey.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like $22 million is a lot of money. And I don't know where that's going to come from. And really, Josh didn't either, right? Josh said, hey, we're still going through everything. He likened it to, the roundtables we had done with COVID, where it's like everything's on the table because there's a lot of non-answers sitting out there right now. Like it feels like we know a lot. And you mentioned basically what we do know right now, what's been reported out of what we know. But in talking to Josh, and I hesitate to get into the weeds about, like, there's so many little like details and different ideas being thrown around to accomplish this, whether it be revenue sharing, or as you mentioned, the scholarship and roster limits. But it's the most sizable shift that we've seen. I asked Josh Whitman if he thinks this will be not the last, but if this will lead to a sense of stability after this. We've done everything else, right? We've done NIL, we've done portal, we've done realignment, we've done all of this. And short answer, he hopes. Maybe there'll be a couple more things, but nothing to the undertaking, Jeremy, of what this is and what it could mean for programs and for campuses, athletic departments around the country. But before we get further, like, part of the impact right now that we know this has had on the University of Illinois is that wrestling facility that they held a press conference for and talked about. That's off the table. Like that.
Yeah. So let me break down. I think there's 3 areas where you can reduce costs, and you also want to raise revenue, which you're hoping through the new college football playoff. There's more money coming in to all the Big Ten schools. That could be significant, but you also got to reduce costs. And one of those is facilities. So he said basically all facilities are on pause, and that includes what was around $15 million wrestling standalone practice facility, which was a huge deal for that program. They've been in Huff Hall for practice. Obviously, they're now competing in the State Farm Center. So that's a concern if I'm, Mike Paletta, and I've been recruiting to that, right? So that's a concern moving forward. Another part of this would be staffing. I think there's been bloat in athletics department staff for a long time, and Whitman said they are now going to have a hiring pause for most positions, right? Like if they have a vacancy, they might have to think twice about whether they want to fill that. Obviously, there's certain positions you have to fill, but some of those positions, the staffing, I think, will decrease as you pay your athletes directly. Because let's be honest, like, they had to spend this money, all this money that they made and weren't giving to athletes. They had to spend it on somebody, so they had to hire more people, buy new facilities. So those things are going to decrease. The other one is cutting expenditures by cutting programs. And I think we know, let's be honest, that men's gymnastics as a collegiate sport is on its deathbed. There are only 12 men's gymnastics program remaining, including Illinois. Justin Spring left to be an assistant coach for the women's program at Alabama for a reason. And I think we all see that this is coming. And I think for men's gymnastics, this might be the final blow, not just Illinois, but I think in just college athletics in general. So let's just be real, like that is a concern. But other sports, are there other sports that could be a concern? Because you got to reduce your costs. And if you could save $500,000 to $1 million just based on the operating costs of those programs, it's got to be something that they look into, which is the reality of what this is. I mean, men's basketball and football have been creating these opportunities for everybody for a really long time. Now we're getting into the real market, Joey, where men's basketball, football, more resources are going into those. That means you got to take it away from some other areas.
Yeah, and to be clear, resources are going into those because if you're not competitive, if you're not appealing in those sports, you run the risk of falling behind quickly and meaningfully in a way that, Josh, you asked Josh Whitman about, and we'll get into in terms of, I guess, I don't even know, relegation, for lack of better terms. We'll get into that. I don't want to get into that at this moment. But, yeah, and I also want to make it clear, like, Josh Whitman wasn't – it probably goes without saying – but he wasn't saying this like, hey, listen, we're going to have to get rid of this. And, it's kind of it. Like, this isn't one of those that he's just like, hey, thank you for your time and tradition here and good luck to you moving forward. Like, this is not the first step any athletic department is going to take. But as you zoom out a little bit condensing sports around the country might be the most financially meaningful step that athletic departments can take in terms of just the cost of doing business and travel and scholarships and whatever the case may be, salaries. And it sucks. Like, it does. It sucks. I understand that people are hearing this and would think, are you kidding me? Like, this sport has done so-and-so played here, or my grandpa, or like, I get it. It's not fun, but alternatively, you run the risk of possibly falling behind in other sports, and all of a sudden you're not in the Big Ten. Yeah. Or you're not in the SEC. And then that sucks really, really bad on a lot of other levels. So it's not really a no-win, but like, you've got to make hard decisions. So those guys are compensated. The people in Josh Whitman's chair and higher up are compensated to make difficult decisions, and even if it's not fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if it's 1, 2, 3 or anything like that. But yeah, like, I think there's certain programs that would be safe. I mean, I think most of the women's programs could be, but you still have to have Title IX and be compliant in all of those things. But it'd just be nerve-wracking. And he said the thing is, the hard part is we need prompt answers, because those coaches need prompt answers. So they have to figure out, like, they need to know, like, what can I tell recruits about this? Do I have a job in 3 years? What's going to happen here? So it's going to be fascinating to find out. And I do not envy Josh Whitman in making those kind of decisions. But the big picture, and the one question I've just had on my mind, I think I've mentioned on this podcast before, Joey, is we have seen a whole conference disappear, like a power conference disappear. And in the dark and in the lurch is Oregon State and Washington State that now are just out of the mix. They're no longer at the table in the power conferences. And in the ACC, you have Clemson and Florida State saying we deserve more money than Wake Forest, which is probably true, right? But like, they don't give a crap about their alliance. And alliances, nobody's giving a crap. Kevin Warren certainly didn't. But like, they don't care about that. They want me. It is dog eat dog world out there. And I've thought for a while, if I'm Illinois, I'm not feeling comfortable right now. If I'm Northwestern, Vanderbilt, Wake Forest, programs like, I'm certainly not Boston College. I am certainly not feeling comfortable. I feel a little bit better if I'm Illinois, even than some of these other Big Ten programs. But I asked that of Whitman today. Like, we have seen contraction. Are you nervous about a super league potentially, where all these television networks want is the top 10 SEC programs, the top 10 Big Ten programs, and that is college football moving forward? And basically is what I was asking, like, are you worried about that? And he said, yes, absolutely. It was the last thing we talked about. And he said, that is why I'm putting everything so much into men's basketball and football right now. We need to be successful for that. When that day comes where they cut, we got to be above that cut line. We have to be one of those teams that is a no-brainer, that if the Big Ten contracts, or the SEC or college football at large contract, we have to be a successful program that's a no-brainer. And that's why basketball is important, and they've done that job, right? And you got to keep it there. But football, getting that right, and being a program that makes too much sense to cut, because you're in Illinois, you're Chicago, and, oh, they've been to bowl games 8 of the last 10 years and made a college football playoff. That is what we're looking at in college athletics. And you could tell, like, that is the goal of these. Is it next 10 years? I don't know, Joey. But it is really important for Illinois to succeed, because I feel like that day is coming. I don't think this contraction is done. And I think the ACC is unstable. Maybe the Big 12 just scoops all those programs up. But Oregon State and Washington State are not going to be alone. And Illinois and Josh Whitman need to make sure they are not the next Washington State and Oregon State.
Yeah, it's a really scary proposition, because there's a lot of money tied to being in the halves of college athletics. And right now, the biggest halves in college, HAV, not HALV, the biggest halves right now in college athletics are the Big Ten and the SEC. And the Big 12, you certainly say, isn't very far behind, and the ACC there. You don't want to fall out of that, man. And it feels weird. Can we just talk about how weird it is, one, to say that, because it's just so radical. It's a radical shift. And then you start thinking, like, the Big Ten, really, until that brief COVID spell in terms of football, yes, no, like, it's pretty much always moved in lockstep. Like, all the Big Ten teams, institutions is about like have really kind of moved together. When you start throwing the money around that's going to be around there, like that's the kind of money that makes programs and institutions not move together anymore. And you move by yourself as close to that money as you can. And if a team or institution that you've been rah-rah with for 80 years and hey, if they're not there, like you're probably not going to wait behind for them, right? Like you're going to what's going to best fund what you're trying to do. And might stink if you're a Big Ten SEC team to say, well, hey, sorry, as you mentioned, Illinois, Northwestern, Vanderbilt, it's tough. Well, hey, we'll catch you later. We've got a huge TV contract waiting for us over here, and good luck with that. What you're not like. It's just a reality of it. It's weird to say that.
Maybe it looks more like the European soccer model, where it's the top 20 programs, and maybe you can get back in there, but it's hard to get back in there, right? So like, so you have 20 teams, they have 20 middle teams, and it's like the group of 5. After that, like, it just feels like where it's heading, because it feels like that's what the TV dollars want. They want Texas and Ohio State. Like they want that matchup. They want Oregon against Florida State, right? Like those are the matchups they want. Like Illinois, Ohio State, is that interesting to them? Well, that's what Illinois needs to do. They need to make sure that matchup is a must-see matchup, or Illinois, Wisconsin is a must-see matchup. Like that's what they have to do moving forward, is get to that Iowa, Wisconsin level. Like if I'm Iowa or Wisconsin, I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good about where I'm at. If I'm Purdue, Illinois, Northwestern, Rutgers, Maryland, I'm not as confident. Like I feel like Illinois is above a lot of those other programs because of the resources they have, the fan base they have, the alumni base they have, where they're situated. You got to win games, and that's why it's just zooming out. That is what Whitman has to be thinking about, and he is.
Yeah, I want to quote real quick. I've got it pulled up here. If we've learned anything over these last 5 years, this is what Josh Whitman said today. It's that you can't be guaranteed anything, and we have to do our best to make sure that those two sports, football and men's basketball, go so that if we ever find ourselves in that place, we're confident where we'll land relative to the red line. Can we just appreciate Josh Whitman saying that, and not like kind of dancing around what was a big question, a heavy question, a fair question, and not just being like, well, hey, I don't know, we're just focused on right now. And would have been reasonable for him to say, yeah, well, I'm not focused on that right now. I'm trying to figure out where $22 million is coming from. I'm trying to figure out, this or that. And I'm glad he zoomed out and acknowledged that reality, because it's not guaranteed, but there's writing in those walls, right? And you can see how this has been trending over the course of, as he mentioned, the last 5 years. So it's heavy, man. And a lot of people don't want to hear it, because this is a change. And this has been the story for 5 years. This is a change to everything we've known about college athletics, where just as the portal people would say, hey, we can't watch this freshman develop into a senior because they'll just leave. And like that was the argument. And now you can't watch this little engine that could watch it collectively get its players better and go on a run to the Rose Bowl way back when with Juice Williams. You know what I mean? Like that, there's a lot of appeal about that, but money matters, and money's been driving things for a long time. And now there's just so much of it being thrown around here that it's the biggest voice, and traditions they don't carry the same weight as money does, unfortunately. And I get it, where people would say, no, that's not for me. Thank you, but no, thank you. I understand that, but that's where it is right now.
Yeah. And it's a reality he has to face. And I just think of, boy, is it good that Josh Whitman is leading Illinois through this, and that this is happening now as opposed to 10 years ago, because Illinois would not have been even close to that red line of getting over that. So they have done a lot of work to push this thing forward. And we've seen men's basketball and women's basketball take huge strides. I think football has taken big strides, but they still got more to take, obviously. But you're way better positioned now to do that over the next 10 years to make sure. So it's just going to be a fascinating time. But I think it's good that you have an athletic director that acknowledges that reality and is preparing for that reality, even if it doesn't come to pass. Maybe the Big Ten, it's tight. You add 2 more pieces and you're the Western Conference, and the SEC is the Eastern Conference. And, you got 20 teams. We have a great football playoff moving forward. But you got to make sure you remain in that. And it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I think you hit it. More than anything, you feel confident that Illinois is going to figure this out, because the guy sitting in the chair with one of the loudest voices is Josh Whitman, and Josh Whitman has been. It's a good question that you asked, Jimmy. I can scroll up and pluck a part of that quote out of what he said, but you said, why you've been at the forefront of all of these conversations for 4 or 5 years. Josh has been the one out there saying, hey, guess what? Like, things are happening. Like, it's going to happen here. Things are going to change. And Josh has been very embracing of that change, save for sports gambling. Everyone who's frustrated with his stance on that.
Hey, Brad Evans.
Yeah. Hi, Brad. But you asked, like, where's that come from? And I'd have to pull out that quote here if you got it. Yeah.
Yeah, he said, like, he's been very aggressive in all of this. Well, you've seen some other programs, including some huge programs like Michigan with NIL. It was very hesitant with this. Well, Whitman's like, oh, this is an opportunity. So I said, where does that come from? What's that meant for your program? And he just said, we made a decision. There was an opportunity for us to change our position, for us to gain on our competition, because we anticipated that some people would be reluctant. Some people would be anxious. And we saw it really as kind of a once-in-a-generation opportunity that there was for this chance for us to move beyond some of the traditional metrics and dynamics that had maybe created some limitations on our progress or replaced some governors on our progress. I think it's been very productive for us. I think it helps just in terms of our mindset. So their ethos under Whitman, who's been very progressive with all of this, is embrace the change, get out in front of it, and let's do what we can to take advantage of this, because we need something to propel us forward. And NIL has certainly done that for Illinois. And just being at the forefront of some of these things with collectives. And, I just think they've been really smart with all of that. And it's really helped the basketball program. And I think now we're starting to see it with the football program. So I think the fact that you have an AD that's leaned into those things, when I can think of some ADs that haven't, and I can think of some past Illinois ADs that wouldn't have done that. So to have a guy who thinks like that, hey, we can use this to our advantage, I think is huge.
It is. It's a big deal. And look, it's also at the time all of this was coming into really hitting full gear, Illinois athletics needed some help. Like, they needed to be innovative and at the forefront of things, because football was sputtering. Men's basketball was in the early stages of Brad Underwood's tenure, which has turned into an exceptional program and a marquee national program, a return to that, I should say. They needed to kind of get out there and find ways that they felt like could help them and be ahead of this. And to their credit, that's worked. And I know, as you mentioned, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to, and he's hired coaches who have embraced it, right? Like Brad Underwood has embraced all of these things in a transfer portal, NIL. Like, he's been like, yeah, come here. Like, we love all of this stuff. And I do think Brett Bielema, like, what's one thing he tells us all the time? People have told me we can't do that in my program. I say, why not? And then they have to explain it to him. And he's been pushing those boundaries. And I think some of that with the academic side of things, they've pushed that and been like, okay, like, I understand, but university, like, help us here so we can have a successful program. I think he's had coaches that have embraced kind of that change as well, even though Bielema might have been reluctant a little bit with some things with NIL. And it might have taken some time to adjust to these things, but these guys all want to win. Shauna wants to win. Like, they've embraced that. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's at the end of the day, if it comes down to embracing it or not embracing it, getting fired, losing $4+ million a year, you're probably going to welcome NIL with open arms. I mean, that's the reality of things. And, like, I understand people are hearing this and thinking like, well, football, really? That's what I think you can embrace, but also recognize you need people to embrace you. You need NIL people to embrace you. And I think you've seen that really start to go quickly here over the last couple months. And Josh seemed pretty encouraged by where it was, not just on the men's basketball front, which is where we have seen it, I guess, mostly at Illinois. You seem to where it was also on the other side of Kirby on football. So, yeah, it is interesting that he's been out. He's been on this thing. Like, this has been a theme of roundtables long before the House case, long before all of this. And credit to Josh Whitman. He's really, really good. And I know someone might think we sound like homers saying it, but he's really, really good. And a lot of people say it, and you're seeing that in the way that he's valued and looked at nationally.
I think we're being pretty objective when we do it, just based on what we've seen with this program, what I've seen over the last several decades, and talking with Lauren Tate, even he's just like, yeah, he's really good. Anything you wish you would ask today? I mean, we had a limited time. You and I and Derek are not going to take all the questions, right? But anything you wish you would ask. I would have liked to have followed up because I know I almost asked for our board only. Have you had any discussions like what do you think of the Missouri series moving forward with football? Have you reconsidered?
I asked about non-con. Yeah, and I should have just said, hey, what's up with Mizzou? That's still a thing. But I don't, I shouldn't look at it like this because Josh is so open. Like everything's on the table to talk to Josh Whitman about at those roundtables. But I do feel like we're still in, like 2 hours is a long time. But you kind of, when there's so much moving and so much happening, like you do feel like you want to really kind of pull at the threads of just those big pictures. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe there's some like really little stuff. And guess what? We'll talk to him next month. We'll talk to him in 3 weeks at Big Ten Media Day, football media days, 4 weeks, I guess. And we can get into that if there's more we feel like, more, I guess, minute stuff that we want to get in. I don't know. The opening statement, you always go in with like we joke about this 70-minute opening statement. We always go in like, all right, listen, we got to get this and we got to get this and that. And then the opening statement's like, all right, well, there'll be a follow-up if I've got one on that, but you pretty much got it. And it's not just to his credit, it's not just hey, I'm going to mention this, I'm just going to move on really quickly. Like there's a lot of thought and a lot of detail in those. So I don't know. I don't think so, honestly. Do you? Do you think there's anything?
Yeah.
No.
It just would have been like little minuscule stuff. Like somebody asked me if we asked about basketball jerseys. I get you guys care about that stuff. And I get it too. Like I care about it. We love our jersey take day, but today for me is the big picture. Like, and Josh gave some nice tidbits. He said they're going to have nice throwback uniforms, which I am really interested to see what they are for football for the Michigan game, because I can imagine the Red Grange jersey would be really interesting if they're able to do something like that. I'm trying to pull it up here, see if I can share it. Something like that, Joey?
Do you think they could, I mean, sure, if that's, do you think they could NIL those out, like sell those out and put them in your collective thing after they wear them? Because I bet people would buy the heck out of those.
Oh, yeah.
Can you do that? Is that something they can do?
It's a different way
I mean,
of
it
raising.
seems like there's a lot of rules right now, right? I do real quick before we go further. Can we talk about NIL really quickly? And because I thought Josh Whitman had some really good thoughts on that, and he was asked the role of collectives, and in short, kind of TBD when this revenue sharing thing starts hitting its stride here. But he said, ideally with NIL, it'll go back to what we all thought NIL was going to be, where it's, he mentioned Caitlin Clark with State Farm, or if the offensive lineman wants to go to a whole offensive line wants to go to a restaurant and do stuff that we had thought for NIL, and basically it'd be a whole new mechanism. It's the way that he's kind of envisioning this, and not trying to rein in an old one, but to rebuild a new one. And he said if schools and programs want to get on board with that, it'll work, he thinks, in conjunction with revenue sharing. And if they don't, it won't work. And I know that sounds really simple, but to me, I heard that as, hey, there's a way to make this where $22 million at each school isn't the new baseline. And then you still stack NIL dollars and all these contracts on top of that. There's a way to do it where the playing field gets a little bit more level. And I thought that was fascinating, because we've talked about you can't put the toothpaste back, but in a sense, that this would kind of do that as much as you possibly can, which it sounds like a daunting task.
Yeah, and I think he was saying like, hey, there's a way we can all make this work, like the way we want it to work, but we all have to want that. And we all have to like agree to those rules and then live by those rules. And he said, I understand there's skepticism, and I wanted to raise my hand because I still have skepticism that everyone's going to buy into this because everybody's competitive. And it means more at certain places, right? Like, is the SEC, are all those schools going to adapt to the same stuff Big Ten wants to do? I have doubts. I really do. I think there's a divide in some of this, what we want to do. Like, this has not been a kumbaya time for college athletics. This has been dog eat dog, and I expect that to continue because everyone wants to win. Everybody wants to get some kind of advantage over somebody. So I still have my doubts. And you could tell Whitman in his voice said, we'll see. Like he kept saying, like, right. He kind of kept saying that we'll see if we can get that. So I think even he has some doubt, but you could tell after last year, like he's saying, hey, let's get our act together and stop letting the courts decide what we want to do. Let's get out in front of this and act like adults. This year, he was like, all right, let's all be governed. Like, we all want to be governed. We all want rules. So let's get those rules and let's move forward and let's all abide by those rules. So I think that was kind of his statement to everybody else out in college athletics, was like, okay, let's get these rules and let's move forward with what college athletics needs to be.
Yeah, and along those lines, completely lost what I asked him, I said, do you think that's a realistic thing? What are your level of concerns? And he said, I lost it again. See, I keep adjusting my earpiece oh my God, my headphones. What was I going to say?
You had something profound, right?
Yeah, super profound.
Blow our minds.
Asked him about, basically the settlement would allow the courts to say, hey, you can have parameters around this stuff again without the fear of John Doe taking you to court 2 days later and saying, you can't do that. You're limiting my earning potential. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And to be able to say parameters are okay to have. Parameters will help everybody. It will keep the level playing field. You will still attract top talent, but it won't be as insane. And I do think there are coaches and administrators out there who want a break from this insanity. Like, for as much as their competitive drive and as much as their overwhelming desire to stay above that quote unquote red cut line exists, if that cut line happens, I think toning this thing down, like, I think there's a lot of appeal to that. And coaches would recognize that.
Just stability, that we're all playing by the same rules. And listen, people are going to cheat, but there needs to be enforcement. I still have doubts about that. But if you can agree on actual rules that need to be enforced, that's a nice step towards a little bit of stability moving forward. So we'll see if they can get that. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's all going to happen here pretty rapidly. Like roster scholarship limits, Whitman said they should know about here very shortly. I still feel like the Title IX aspect of the revenue sharing is going to get challenged in court one way or the other, either by a male athlete or a female athlete. But all of this stuff is going to be fascinating to watch. But Whitman seems to have a really good pulse on it. So anything else to add before we get out of here?
Our really last big official weekend, visit weekend of the month of June. I don't know how much really there's left to go into that. We've talked about this month for a long time. I think there's a chance to get a couple commits this weekend, Jeremy, to bolster this class of 2025. And then it'll be decision date for a lot of guys who have taken multiple visits this June. And if some of those guys want to commit by early July, we'll start seeing that. And I think you'll see a bulk of the Illinois football class and multiple classes across the country fill up here over the course of the next 4 weeks. Yeah,
before I head out on vacation next week, I'm sure Illinois will have a few more additions in this class, and we'll break it down and the questions kind of lingering forward. But I think we could break that down in another podcast. I'm going to go swim with the kids right now. That's what I'm going to do.
I don't want you to work on vacation, but if you do have to pod while you're there, you better get a beach view so we can all at least live through you for a moment.
We'll try to do that. Yeah, heading to Fort Myers Beach, Joey, and it's actually cooler there than it is in Central Illinois right now, believe it or not.
We live different lives. You're going there. I'm going to Denver with a backpack full of as many belongings as I can in July. So let's see if we can make that work.
Looking forward to it. Joey Wagner, thank you, buddy. As always, thank you to everybody for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. Hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notifications bell as well. Joey like that. Shout out.
You're so embarrassing, dude. You're so freaking embarrassing.
Everybody have a great day. I'm a dad. That's what I do. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer podcast. Hello.